Whenever you're ready, you just get started. Yeah. And just so you know, I'll go to the back of the room and give you some of the signals for stuff for how much time there is left. So you'll see those. I'll sort of walk back there and kind of flash it. Okay.
Okay. Hi, good afternoon. Wow, this is loud. Those speakers are very effective. Good afternoon. My name is Karen Peters, and I am the Cabinet Executive Officer for the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. That's a story, but I won't tell you that story today. I have lots of other more interesting things to talk about. I will talk a little bit today about a few topics. I want to talk about, I am a relatively new state employee and new to ADEQ since I arrived there in February. Governor Hobbs appointed me to lead the agency. And so one of the questions that I get quite frequently, having been so recently put into the office, is, what are my priorities for the agency? So I'll talk a little bit about that. I would really like to chat about some of the initiatives we have regarding engagement, with a focus, of course, on tribal engagement. And then lastly, I will talk a little bit about the things that keep me up at night? That's another question I get almost every time I talk to groups is, what's going on that's really bugging you in Arizona as far as ADEQ is concerned. So what's up on the screen, and some of you should have hard copies, is just a handout that we prepared, some highlights of things that we're working on that pertain to tribal communities in Arizona. And I'll talk a little bit about some of those as well. But first, I want to turn the mic over to my colleague. You may already know our tribal liaison, Len Drago, but if you don't, I'm going to let him introduce himself.
Thank you very much, Karen. It's good to be here. I've got to see a lot of you over the past few years. I've got to meet some new folks too, which has been great as tribal liaison, because one of our goals you'll see with Karen at the leadership level is we want to get out to the tribes and not only talk about what permits might be impacting tribes, is what we've been typically doing, is we want to spend more time with tribes to understand what's going on in your area, what it is that we could potentially help out on, those sort of things, training and the like. So it's good to be here. I'll be around all week. I would love to meet you and spend some time with you. And if you ever need anything, just call on me. My contact info is in the one pager. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Len. Len's a terrific resource, so please seek him out, get his contact information. He is here to help troubleshoot and work with tribes. Among other responsibilities, he's got a lot on his plate. Okay, so I came to the agency, as I said, in February of this year, and I set out to accomplish a couple of things right off the bat, things that are probably too big to accomplish in a 4-year term, but I am going to do my best to do what I can. The first one, and this is somewhat mundane, but it's really, really important, and that is to stabilize the finances of the agency. Since the Great Recession, there was a shift in the way the ADEQ funds its programs away from general fund to being more of a fee-based, self-sustaining agency. And over the years since, that's proven to not be as effective as we hoped it would. A lot of programs are not able to staff to the degree that's needed in order to fulfill our statutory responsibilities. And so we are working hard to make the case to our state legislature that they need to fund us with a combination of fees and general fund allocation, because there are certain things that ADEQ must do that we shouldn't be charging permit holders for example, and this gets to the second priority, and I'll just tell you what that is. So the second priority is to address some significant deficiencies that were identified by the state auditor general. They did a very scathing report in 2021 and pointed out that there were a number of statutory requirements that DEQ was not fulfilling. Things like statewide ambient groundwater monitoring. We are required to be out in the state sampling groundwater and identifying groundwater quality issues. We didn't have the staff for that, and that's not something that we can charge permit holders to do, clearly. Another significant deficiency was that we were not making progress on impaired waters. And again, that is something that is really not within the responsibility of a fee payer to fund. And we didn't have the staff to do that either. And so what we've been doing now over the course of the last year, since just before I got there, they made some significant work, did some significant work to identify staff needs to do those things that the Auditor General suggested we weren't doing, and to identify funds and staff up to start those programs back up. They had been in place before, but again, over the course of, with the transition to a self-sustaining fee-based organization, could not sustain those programs. And so for, just out of the gate, stabilizing our finances and addressing those very significant deficiencies are the first priorities that I identified as I came into the organization. Those are going to be hard to do, and we are working with our stakeholder community, working with communities at large, so they understand the benefit of us doing the mandates that the state legislature has given to us, so that they will help support the funding that we need in order to maintain the staff we need to do those things. Now, that's kind of arcane. That's not particularly exciting, but it's just so important that we deliver on what the state policymakers have directed us to do. So those are threshold issues that we're working on. The other thing that I'll talk about is an emphasis on communities. DEQ over the past many years has focused on the regulated community, has really worked to provide great customer service to regulated entities that are coming to us to get permits, and treated those as our primary customers. And there's really no doubt that those are customers of ADQ and they need good customer service. And we've gotten very, very good at responding to those needs. But it has been a little bit at the expense of communities at large. And so what I also have asked the agency to do is think about how we really, who our customers really are, because in my view, the agency exists to serve all of the residents of Arizona. And so we should be talking to all of the residents of Arizona, understanding their needs and working with them. So that is something I'll talk a little bit more about. I don't want to neglect the handout. I definitely do want to talk a little bit about the issues that are shared here. Just to elaborate a little bit. First there, we do talk about our tribal consultation and collaboration policy. We want to, I will be talking more about that in a moment, but that is a huge priority for us. We need to revisit and revise the policy. It's been in place for a number of years. I absolutely feel that we can do better, but we will need to work directly with Arizona tribes to do that. But there are also a couple of really cool opportunities highlighted in the handout. And let's see, the Brownfields program, you're probably aware of that. EPA funds a state level Brownfields grant program. And we have staff devoted to helping communities to identify sites, brownfield sites, which are contaminated. Somehow there are impediments to use of those sites or development of those sites. And so the Brownfields program is there to work through those things and overcome those barriers so that sites can be used and reused and enjoyed by communities. So that's a great opportunity, and we have staff that is just ready, willing, and excited to help communities work on these problems. And I encourage anyone with a blighted site, a contaminated site, to come and talk to us, and there's contact information here. The other item here on the right is just so exciting to me because this program, our recycling grants program, has been on the books for a number of years, but we have not had the funding to do it since I think 2009. And so this year, the legislature did put new dollars into our recycling program so that we could give grants for projects and programs that further a circular economy in Arizona. And that can encompass anything from infrastructure to education and awareness. We are really thrilled that we have the opportunity to do these grants again this year. We have $1 million, which is so exciting. So that we want to grant by the end of this calendar year. Applications are due on December 1st. Tribes are eligible applicants. Absolutely encourage those. We want to have a statewide impact. This is not something that's just reserved for urban areas at all. And so we will be making those grant decisions by the end of 2023, getting money out into communities. It should be very cool. Of course, our emergency response unit, which is highlighted here on the back, does, I think, weekly outreach to tribes and communities around the state regarding training opportunities and other resources, things that are happening in the agencies that are responsible for emergency response, both state and federal. So please avail yourselves of those updates. And then enhanced engagement strategy. So let me talk about that. As I said, what I'm hoping to do at ADEQ is to pivot the organization toward communities. And this is, cultural change, organizational change doesn't happen overnight. I'm starting this process with the agency, and believe me, it's like turning an ocean liner. But I'm really enthusiastic, and I think that the staff at ADEQ are embracing the idea of really serving communities and engaging with communities. What I have said is that we need to be in communities where people are, speaking to them in language they understand, building a trusting relationship so that they understand that we really are there to fulfill our mission, which is to protect and enhance public health and the environment in Arizona. That's a big, Arizona is a pretty big place, and it's pretty dispersed. And so accomplishing that is something that requires more staff. It requires more time. There's some concern in programs that it may impact permit timeframes, but I'm committed to making sure that we stay within the state law required timeframes, but also accommodate this kind of communication. And the only way to do that is to be proactive in talking to communities before permitting decisions are in the works. Because once an application hits our desks, we do have some very prescribed timeframes we need to meet. Otherwise, we forfeit our ability to collect permit fees, which pay for our staff. And so we're very highly motivated to meet those timeframes. But we are also very highly motivated to make sure that the people who are affected by those permitting decisions have a voice and are talking to us, and we are talking to them and listening to them so that we can make the best decisions that we can make. That is very important. We have a new section within the agency devoted to that effort. It's the Community and Intergovernmental Engagement section. New staff, Environmental Justice Coordinator is housed within that section, as is our border coordination function, but also all of our community liaisons, which we've had for years, including Len as the tribal liaison. But really building it into the processes within the operating departments. So like any environmental regulatory agency, we've got an air quality program, water quality program, and what we call our waste programs, which include things like brownfields and solid waste and hazardous waste regulation and so on. So getting the folks, the engineers and the hydrologists and geologists and all the really amazing scientists that we have in our agency to understand communities that they're serving is going to require support from this new section. And so I'm really looking forward to getting that in place and working with them. But a big part of what we want to do, and part of the reason that I very much wanted to be with you today, is to talk about the tribal consultation and collaboration policy. As I said, we've had this policy. It's been in place. Len, correct me, how many years ago did we last? 03. We do an annual report to the state governor's office that highlights all the work that we've done during the course of the previous year. But the policy itself is very old.
It's been updated. Yeah, our policy was updated about 2 years ago, but then we're embarking on another update that Karen's going to talk to you about. That's the headliner on this handout.
Circling back. Mhm. Okay. So I've read through the existing policy that was most recently updated a couple of years ago. And I've talked to folks around Arizona about it and asked them very specifically, how can we make this better? What is missing from this policy? And it's clear to me that what is missing is real input from the 22 Arizona tribes. And so what we are wanting to do is engage with each tribe individually and talk about what consultation and collaboration means to them. I understand it's going to be unique to each. I don't expect that to be uniform, so that we can reflect it in the policy that we're redoing. I just think it's very, very important. And so I am here to request your help to get that done. We want to publish it next October when our next annual report is due. And so we'll be wanting to reach out after the new year, probably, because, once you get to Halloween, the year's really over. So after the new year, we'll be wanting to really engage, sit down and talk about what's in the policy, what's not in the policy, what needs to be in the policy so that we can be effective. This is just a really critical priority for us. And I was really delighted that Governor Hobbs was part of the opening session this morning, Laura. And emphasizing how important these issues are to her and her administration as well. So I look forward to engaging with you. I hope you have questions once I finish yammering on here for a minute, so that we can help make that as effective a process as it can be. So those are my first two topics, and so now I can talk about what keeps me awake at night. What are the pressing issues that ADEQ is addressing now? So let's do this by category. Air quality first. Air quality, we have a number of areas around Arizona that are not in attainment with federal clean air standards. There are a few in the rural areas that are associated with historic and current mining operations. Some of those are lead and SO2 violations that we're needing to address. But perhaps most acutely in the metropolitan area of Phoenix in Maricopa County, which is the large county that includes Phoenix, we have been downgraded for ozone non-attainment. We also have some pretty tough particulate matter, dust violations there as well. The region is up against some pretty significant timelines and sanctions under the Clean Air Act if we do not address these violations. So we're working very actively with the region, with all of the jurisdictions within the region, and EPA, of course, to identify how to navigate this very complex problem. Ozone is perhaps the most complicated of all of the national ambient air quality standards, NAAQS, to get your head around, because it's not something that exists all by itself. It's a byproduct of other pollutants that in combination with sunlight create ozone, which is very, very detrimental to respiratory health, particularly vulnerable communities or populations like infants, elderly, anyone with a respiratory issue. So that keeps me, that one keeps me very busy and occupies my mind a lot. It's not entirely within our jurisdiction. The planning process to come into compliance is delegated to the region. And so we're encouraging the region, working hard to get the region engaged in finding those solutions. So that's one in air quality. With regard to water quality and quantity, this is an area of some urgency, particularly in rural Arizona. And the reason for that is that in the metro areas of Arizona, we have some very long-standing and effective controls and management responsibilities for managing groundwater. And those are reflected in the fact that in those urban areas, groundwater levels are not really declining. They're pretty stable. But when you get outside of those areas, there are no regulations on pumping groundwater. Anybody can do it. It's not monitored, and that is starting to cause some very significant groundwater level declines in rural parts of our state. And that's not within my agency's purview necessarily. We have a whole nother state agency devoted to that problem, the Arizona Department of Water Resources. However, in those rural areas, most of the drinking water providers, the public water systems that are regulated by ADEQ, rely entirely on groundwater. And so to the extent that groundwater levels are declining, those water systems find themselves in more and more difficult situations. We're already seeing some of the small water systems around the state encountering operational issues like not having sufficient certified operators for their systems, real workforce development issue. That we're responsible. We help with operator certification and training, but there's just not enough certified operators to go around. They're expensive. Some of these really, really tiny water systems can't really afford it, even though it's a regulatory necessity that you have certified operators. So we have kind of a workforce crisis in addition to a groundwater level crisis. And to the extent that those providers rely entirely on groundwater, the groundwater quality there is paramount. Of course, Arizona is a highly mineralized state, like so many in the West are. That's been terrific for the resource extraction industry, but it also means that there are naturally occurring toxic metals in our groundwater. We have lots of high levels of arsenic, lead, and other metals that occur naturally in the groundwater. They just leach out of the rocks and they're there. But obviously, if you are a rural public water system and that's the water you rely on to serve your customers, clearly if you provide that water untreated to your customers, you're in trouble. We'll point that out to you. That does not comport with the Safe Drinking Water Act. And so we need to work with our water providers around the state. Some of the systems that they operate are very small, very old, and they're not set up to treat for some of the things that naturally occur in the groundwater. However, there are things that are being introduced to the groundwater that they're obviously not prepared to address. One being nitrate contamination. Nitrates are a pollutant that has very detrimental effects, particularly to infants. And so if you're violating nitrate levels in your drinking water, it's harmful to the community that it serves. Where do nitrates come from? Well, the traditional answer is fertilizers, agriculture. But what we're discovering is that that's not the entire problem, and it may not even be the main source of the problem. I'm not sure. I don't know what degree of nitrate contamination is coming from fertilizer versus failing septic systems. We have about 600,000 septic systems in our state. Our research tells us that those are not maintained on a regular basis. Many of them are failing. But what perhaps is most disturbing to me, and I did not know this, is that we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 to 70,000 illegal cesspools in operation in Arizona. Yes, that's exactly the reaction I had. And we don't know exactly where they are. No one's required to tell us about them. But it's very clear to us that these systems are impacting groundwater. And the reason it's clear to us is that as we analyze groundwater, as we're required to do, what we're finding there are things that come from food, preservatives, artificial sweeteners, pharmaceuticals, things that wouldn't get to groundwater naturally. And there's only a couple of pathways, and certainly failing septic systems and cesspools are a big part of that problem. We do not have an effective regulatory program to deal with that. And so that's an important priority for us, is to figure out what we can do with the authority we have and what additional authority we need to start to address it. We, like so many states around the West, have a strong bias against regulation of private property, particularly regulation of residential private property. So the idea of state regulators knocking on your door and asking to see your septic maintenance records is not popular and probably not going to happen, but there are things we can do. And I think it's just very, very important that we try because of what we're seeing around the state with nitrates in groundwater and other things like sucralose, that's in diet soda. Where's that coming from? It's only one real place that it's coming from. So between those two issues, really significant, complicated ozone pollution in the metro area and the reliance on groundwater that is impacted by all these factors in rural Arizona for drinking purposes, I'm taking deep breaths every day and trying to figure out a path forward, working with communities. People in communities need to understand these things are being thought about. We are actively wanting to make sure that everybody in Arizona is getting water from a safe place. Right now, we know that there are roughly 11,000 people in Arizona that are being served water by their public water system that does not meet federal drinking water standards. And that is something we are very actively working to address every day. We are working on that. We have historically been focused on compliance assistance for those systems. But in light of the fact that, close to 11,000 people are impacted by this, we are increasingly looking toward enforcement to just try and accelerate getting into compliance, getting those systems repaired, getting treatment in place where it's not there, and protecting those customers. So that's what I'm working on, and those are things that have come up in the months since I arrived at ADQ that I'm really interested in finding solutions for. And so that is what I wanted to share with you today, but I'm really interested to know if you have questions for me. And I think this is where I have to pass the microphone. You've got it. Okay. Excellent. Thanks so much. So anything I didn't talk about that you wanted me to address, or are there questions on anything I said that didn't make sense to you or you want more information about? I'm really happy to engage with you on any questions you have. And there's one in the back.
I'm always curious what ADEQ's role is when it comes to all the different mines in Arizona that are in need of cleaning up the arsenic levels. And well, I can go on and on of the different, you said lead, radioactive, I can go on, etc. So what is your role?
Thank you. That's an excellent question. Well, a couple things are going on, and I'm really excited that Navajo EPA is here today because one of the things that we've partnered with US EPA on is their work to address the many scattered uranium mine sites across the Navajo reservation, and that, of course, is in both Arizona and New Mexico. We are not directly involved with that as a state agency, but we're very supportive, and we want to be as helpful as we can to address those issues. Outside of the of that area, there are not very many uranium sites to address, but there are maybe a handful. There obviously are many abandoned hard rock mining sites throughout our state. And so what we're doing right now is working with the state mine inspector and the industry itself. The Arizona Mining Association is really interested in helping us to inventory all these abandoned mine sites, and then we can assess them. We have had some great success on a very ad hoc basis with doing some cleanups. And what I'd really like to accomplish is getting an inventory and doing some prioritization so that we can most effectively marshal resources towards those. That is something we brought to the attention of not just the industry, but the governor's office said, look, this is something we think we could make some real progress on if we had some additional resources. It's always about that. So yes, excellent question, and something we need to address. Anybody else?
That includes copper, abandoned copper mines?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, when I say hard rock, I mean copper. We have a lot of historical silver and gold mines too. And you know, like I said, we have so many naturally occurring metals. When you dig up ore for one, you're going to find for all. And that ends up in tailings piles and other places where it can leach into surface and groundwater, and we need to address that. We are working very closely with EPA. EPA is announcing the finalization of a decision on a Superfund site in the rural area of Dewey Humboldt, which is near Prescott, Arizona, on an old Superfund mine site there. And so we're really excited to get that remedy underway and help the people that live there to address the soil contamination. Really is what they're dealing with. They've got tailings and stuff that's deposited via the air in their yards and where they live and go to school and play. And so we want to help to get that one done. Anybody else?
Hi, Karen. I'm Robert Seaman with US EPA. I'm a tribal solid waste liaison for Arizona. And I talked to Len over lunch, and I've mentioned this before, JB Shaw and all that. Is there a way that the tire fee program can better serve tribal communities? For the tire disposal program?
Yes, right. Waste tires are a persistent issue in Arizona, and we are actively looking at that as well. Right now, under state law, the waste tires are mostly addressed by counties. And so we are talking with the counties, the County Supervisors Association in Arizona, and the Association of Counties, the two different organizations, to understand how we can support them better, or if we need to take a more active role in regulating. One of the things that very early on for me, I was at a meeting with officials from border communities down in Tubac a few months ago, and my counterpart in Sonora raised that with me very specifically and said, you guys really need to do better. Tires are showing up in Mexico. They're being reused and are a real safety problem. And what you need to do is make sure that they're rendered unusable before they come across the border. So that's another really tricky aspect to the work that we need to do to address waste tires. But waste tires are also, to the extent that they're stored in huge piles, which tends to be how those are managed initially, are an awful fire hazard. We've had a lot of fires. A lot of fires. Of course, we have forest restoration priorities that our state forester is working on, but waste tire fires, recycling facility fires, composting and mulch fires are significant issues that impact air quality in the areas where those fires occur. I think that most of the United States didn't really have to deal with the impacts of fire so much until very recently. And so now it appears that perhaps we're all in the same boat with huge forest fires happening across much of Canada and, of course, in the Pacific Northwest as well, impacting public health. But here in Arizona, or here there in Arizona, we're not there now. Tire fires, recycling fires, composting facility fires are a significant problem. We do have right now, it's prescribed burn season. Forest management does require there be some burning activity, and the skies fill with smoke from prescribed fires. That's you need to do it, but people don't know the difference necessarily. There's smoke in the air, so we get the calls. But that's good. We want to know what people are seeing and experiencing. But waste tires are part of that problem. So thank you. Thank you for raising that. It looks like I just have a couple of minutes left, but I would love to take one or two more questions. We've got one right here in front.
Director, what is the Arizona leadership, our governor, and your view on what is it, the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement, environmental cooperation, and how are you going to take advantage of these opportunities for movement on climate change and international trade?
That's a big question.
I just threw my hat in the ring, so I'm going to be joining that.
Oh, you are? Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. The issues with the Canada, United States, Mexico trade agreements and related issues are not clear and present for ADEQ right now. They may be with the governor's commerce staff and perhaps other folks in her office. We are more engaged as an agency with the border, the Mexico issues. We've got significant issues in border communities on both sides related to failing infrastructure that's impacting public health, be it wastewater, sanitary sewer overflows with terrible terrible waste running in the streets of our border communities. And that's something that we're working with the United States and Mexico and Sonora to work our way through. But in terms of trade, we are not involved. Climate is another story. It was alluded to this morning that obviously the federal government has significant climate pollution reduction grant work in the works. And the Governor's Office of Resiliency is very actively working on preparing the plan necessary that would be the threshold plan to allow communities from across the state to apply for additional climate pollution reduction grants. That's a high priority for Governor Hobbs' office. We are in a support role there. Believe it or not, our state legislature prohibits ADEQ from doing anything climate related. That's another fun story that I won't tell right now. But we are in a support role. We are doing the data collection. We are helping them think through what the most compelling plan could be. So more to come, and we look forward to working with you if there's an opportunity to do that. There was one more over here.
Well, you really piqued my interest. I was going to go.
I saw that.
I was going to let us go on time, but my question was related to the climate pollution reduction grant situation. I work for Gila River. I'm new. You're a little bit newer than me. I started in January, so we'll be newbies together. I'm the director for DEQ, and we have a climate pollution reduction grant, and we're going to be working with the state. In fact, we have a meeting with the state and at least one other tribe on Tuesday this coming week. I don't know if Navajo got a CPRG or not, so I'm gonna forward the invitation to Mr. Etsy. Anyways, my question was related to the climate pollution reduction grant. What kinds of things are we talking about? What kind of things is the state talking about? State of Arizona. And by the way, I thought Governor Hobbs did a wonderful address. So say thanks for it.
Yes, thank you. Thanks very much. I didn't know that Governor Hobbs was going to do a welcome. It was a very pleasant surprise, and I was delighted to see it. But right now, as I said, the Office of Resiliency and Governor Hobbs' office is working on the state climate pollution reduction grant plan that is due by, I think, March 1st. And that requires that there be a state greenhouse gas inventory. And I think that as we stand here today, I stand here, you sit here today, that is the very top priority and the most urgent thing, is to figure out how to do the greenhouse gas inventory adequately to allow further grants to occur under the program after the state plan is submitted. Again, we're providing whatever data support we can on that. A lot of communities around the state have done individual greenhouse gas inventories. Maricopa County has, and several other smaller communities have. So the urgent priority for them is to round all that up and maybe extrapolate that into a state plan that we can submit that meets the requirements of the Inflation Reduction Act. Okay, I think that's my time. What a pleasure to be with you today. Thanks very, very much. Any questions you have, please reach out to me or Len.
Yeah, just leave it
Still on. It's gonna...
I just recently identified as the liaison at state. All of our tribes, all of the states, but we know that the state